Guys, this is part 3 of a picture book of Harriet Tubman. This should be the last part. If not, there'll be a fourth. Once slaves began their journey north with Harriet, she wouldn't let them turn back. When slaves were too scared to go on, Harriet pointed a gun at their heads and said, "You'll go on, or you'll die." Years later, Harriet said proudly, "I never ran my train off the track. I never lost a passenger." Harriet was called Moses because she led her people out of slavery. There was a huge reward waiting for anyone who caught her, but no one ever did. Remember, you can always pause to look at the pictures a little longer. In 1858, Harriet met John Brown, a leader in the movement to end slavery. He called her one of the best and bravest people in America. He called her General Tubman. What did you learn about Harriet's years as a conductor on the Underground Railroad? Go ahead and hit pause and think about that and come up with an answer. In November 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president, and 11 southern states withdrew from the United States. They didn't want Lincoln, a man who hated slavery, to be their leader. The war between the North and the South, the Civil War, began on April 12, 1861. During the war, Harriet Tubman worked as a nurse and a spy for the Northern Army. She went into enemy territory and led hundreds of slaves to freedom. She helped care for slaves who ran north during the fight. In December 1865, soon after the Civil War ended, an amendment to the U.S. Constitution passed. Slavery was no longer allowed in the United States. The Civil War, ladies and gentlemen, was started for many different reasons and fought for many different reasons. One of them was to end slavery, and the other one of the primary ones was to reunite the two divided states of the Northern United States and the Confederate Southern United States. But the two main reasons were to end slavery and to keep our country together as a whole. Just as a little background knowledge. After the war, Harriet Tubman returned to her home in Auburn, New York. John Tubman had died in 1867. In 1869, Harriet married a former slave and soldier for the Northern Army, Nelson Davis. In Auburn, she went from house to house selling vegetables. Wherever she went, she was asked to tell her adventures on the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman helped many former slaves who came to her in Auburn. She supported the suffragette movement, the fight for the right of women to vote in the United States. It wasn't until early 1900s that women did gain the right to vote nationwide. Other states adopted women's right to vote earlier, but it wasn't until, I want to say, the 1910s that women across the nation were able to vote. Harriet helped establish a home in Auburn for sick, poor, and homeless black people. When she moved into that home in 1911, she was old and weak. "I am here. I hear them bells a-ringin'. I can hear the angels singin'," she said. Soon after that, on March 10th, 1913, she died. She was more than 90 years old. Harriet Tubman was a brave, courageous woman. She was admired and loved by many people who knew her. She was a conductor on the railroad to freedom, a Moses to her people. Remember, you guys can pause. What did you admire about Harriet Tubman? And what can we learn from her life that might help in our own lives? Let me ask those two questions again. What do you admire about Harriet Tubman? And what can we learn from her life that you can take into your own lives? Okay? So in the next lesson that we're going to do here pretty soon is going to be more directly specific about exploring inferences. Okay? As always, stay classy, Golden Eagles, and I will see you for tomorrow's lesson.